Video is going to cover entering flow test information for when we start hydrant testing. Hydrant testing is split into two separate parts. There is the work orders that have been created, and then there's entering flow test information. So we'll cover the flow test information first, and then the work orders part. So the hydrant check sheets have changed a little bit. This is the new hydrant check sheets. It's got all the same information that previous ones have had, just laid out a little bit different. The first column is obviously the hydrant number. The second column is the location, which isn't always the address, the exact address. It's more of the just location description. The third column is for whenever we have to pair hydrants up to know which ones we're testing which ones with. Previously, we always had to write it off to the side or just find a way to do it. That's what this column is for, is just to make that process a little easier. If you want to number it, if we're putting 616 and 617 together, you both want to number them one or letters, whatever works for you. Just left that column there for you. The color is what color they are supposed to be based on last year's flow tests, if that information was accurate or if it transferred over correctly. So that may not be completely accurate. The address is the exact physical address of the hydrant. The district column, I know it looks like a date, but that's just the formatting thing in Excel. The district, so this is actually District 5601. I know it looks like 2001, but it's actually 5601. Latitude and longitude, if you need more exact information on it. And spots to write your flow readings down. And then as well as what time you did it and what hydrant you flowed it with, what your reference hydrant. You'll need all that information for entering your flow tests into emergency reporting. The maps are also different. They should be full color maps based on Google Mapping with all the hydrant numbers on them. You can also access these maps on the tablets. If you pull up the Google Maps program on any of the tablets, all of these hydrants are built into the My Maps or My Places on the tablets. If you know how to use Google Maps a little bit, they're pretty easy to find, and it's all saved on the tablet if you want zoomable or easier to use mapping. They're also printed off and included in all the hydrant packets. So after you go out and flow test hydrants and gather your data on your hydrant check sheets, then you need to come in and enter your flow tests. So knowing which hydrants that you tested, you can obviously sort through the list to find the one you want just by scrolling through the list. So we're doing 616 first. You can manually type in your number, and it'll come up. Just type it in and push enter, and you can sort that way. Or since in this case we're entering all of zone 5601, or at least 21 or 22 of our hydrants are in the same zone, you can come up here and pick your correct zone, 5601, and then it'll only display hydrants in that zone, and it will stay on that selection until you change it. So if you're going to enter in all of your 5601 hydrants, you can just leave it at that zone selection, and it'll make it a lot easier, because then instead of sorting through 1,200 hydrants, you're only sorting through 21 or 22 hydrants. So for entering hydrant flow test information, you can open the hydrant by double-clicking it. Hit your flow test tab within that hydrant. Let me see, I entered one today already, and then you just add a flow test. A quicker way to access that is if we're still on hydrant 616 in our list, if you come here it'll take you straight to the flow test tab by pushing the little fire hydrant button over on the side. And then you just hit add a flow test. It'll save you a few clicks doing it that way. So we are entering a new flow test for hydrant 616. The date and time that you did it. It's going to auto default to today's date and the current time. So change the date to, if you're entering it, make sure you have the correct date and the time that you tested the hydrant. Who tested it? If you're the one that tested it, it's pretty easy. You just push the me button. If someone else tested it, if you just start to type their name in, it'll come right up and you can click it. The rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. So you enter your static pressure that you recorded for hydrant 616 that you wrote down. So we'll say it was 60. Residual pressure, again, pretty straightforward. It was 40. Your desired pressure is the pressure that we use for our flow. General standard for that is flow at 20 psi. So it's going to auto default to 20 psi, and you can leave it at that. If for any reason we ever do need to change that, it can be changed, but our auto default is 20 psi. Your downstream hydrant is the hydrant that you paired it with, the one that you were flowing to get your residual pressure. So in our instance, it's going to be hydrant, just for this example, let's say we flowed it with hydrant 617. So we'll enter in our 617. Your port diameter will almost always be 2.5 because that's the size port you opened on the downstream hydrant. Friction coefficient, for the most part, it's always going to be this example. There are a few different hydrants out there, so those do need to be recorded if it's a different style of hydrant, but they're almost always going to be the 0.9 friction coefficient, which is the same as we always used in the past. And your pitot pressure is the pitot pressure for the downstream hydrant, not the one we're entering. So I know we're entering a flow test for 616, but your pitot pressure is actually the pitot pressure for hydrant 617. So you would come to your flow test sheet and get your pitot pressure off of your paired hydrant. So in this instance, 617. We'll say it was 40. And then it'll calculate your flow at 20 gallons per minute. This is emergency reporting bases off of the current NFPA standard for flow tests, and this is all the information that it needs to get to complete that formula. If it passed the flow test, make sure that you put passed. If it didn't flow, obviously it failed. Date and time, just change it to now. It'll put today's date and the time. If you have anything to remark about it, put that in there and then save it. When you save it, it still stays on this flow test, but it did save it. So to enter your next one, you just start over again. You just go to home, go to your next hydrant, enter in a flow test, and then you'll do your next hydrant. It's exactly the same as the last hydrant did. So after you enter in all your flow test data, you need to put that you completed the assigned work orders. All the work orders are under the main hydrants screen, which is where we're at, hydrants and home. So we'll need to complete the work orders for those. We had to do work orders because we're only doing a quarter of the hydrants this year. So in order to know what hydrants we're getting tested this year and which ones are not, they've been divided up into, so 25% of the hydrants are assigned this year, and those work orders will automatically reassign themselves in 4 years. So as you can see, there's actually a lot of work orders for all the hydrants, different ones for maintenance. There's some for painting or whatever. So in order to know just the flow test ones, you can start, if you go to, when you're in your work orders, you could come to your title and just type in flow test or flow test interval. And you push enter, and now the only ones that will show up are the flow test interval ones. Unfortunately, you can't sort by district on work orders, but you can bulk do them. So for ours, we started with 616, 617. So you'll come find your hydrants, bulk select whatever ones you're doing. I wouldn't suggest trying to do all 30 of them at once, 35 of them at once, because if you click wrong, it'll unselect them all. Just do them in thirds or whatever you feel comfortable with. That you're not going to click wrong at some point. So once you select your hydrants that you're going to complete, that you've done, you select them like we've done here. And then if you scroll back up to the top of the list, all the way to the top of the hydrant screen, you'll see this bulk operations. Click it. Complete those work orders for form bulk operation. You're the one entering it, so just change it to me, the date you did it, any description of who went out and did it, what date you did it, if there's anything to describe about completing these work orders, and then how long it took you. So if you are going to enter in all 35 of them and you were out for, say, 5 hours, you can put in that you were out for 5 hours, and it'll auto-calculate how long you were out based on how many work orders you select. Otherwise, you can put about how long you can, or you can just enter in, if you know it took you 15 minutes, or if you know it took you 15 minutes per work order, you can just put in that it took you a quarter of an hour per work order, and it'll auto-calculate how long you were out. And then you just click complete orders, and that will completely eliminate those from the list so that we can see that they are completed. And it'll be easy to see which hydrants have not yet been tested this year, just based on the completion of the work orders. So there it is. I know it's a two-step process this year for entering the flow test information and completing the work order. The process is fairly straightforward, and we're only testing 300 to 330 hydrants a year now, so it won't really be too bad.